sitting next to a radio with your family, I mean, that's like very idealistic. But I think if it was just like, okay, this is your source of entertainment, it's a unifying thing, or it could be. And I think that's kind of my idealistic goal.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation, in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
Hey, Ethan Shanty. Ethan Shanty is the producer of Northwards. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Okay. That's the show for the day.
Thank you.
See you later.
Both of us have a little something in common in our careers. We started in pretty small town radio.
Oh, I was going to say minor league baseball, but no, that's not true. You're right. Yeah, small town radio. Definitely, yeah. Radio's basically been my only real job, my only career since college, which I got into very unexpectedly. I was a college DJ, also did not expect to do that. I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in radio, but a bunch of my friends were in the station, and I started hanging out there all the time, and they were like, well, why don't you just train and take your air test? And I dragged my feet and finally was kind of forced to do it by my friend Jamie. So I owe my entire career to Jamie. But I wasn't, although I had a lot of fun, I wasn't especially enthusiastic about it at the time, as far as thinking about what my future might hold. So in my opinion, I was the least likely of all of my radio station comrades at 90.3 The Way, SUNY Potsdam, to actually take up the mantle as a professional. I didn't expect it at all.
Well, and for me, it was a little bit different. I wanted to get into radio since I was a little kid. But then when I was in college, I had an internship at a radio station in the big city, if you consider Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the big city.
I do.
It's certainly bigger than anything in the North Country. But then my first full-time job was as the news director at this tiny little station in a town about the size of Canton or Potsdam in northeastern Iowa. And, I don't know about you, but when I thought of going into small-town radio when I started, there were all these kind of romantic notions of sitting there, and you sort of think that hey, I'm the man here. This is
I call the shots.
The microphone.
yeah. Not only am I the host, but I'm also the program director. As in your fantasy, you're the one who's calling all the shots, and you're the personality that people call late at night. And there's a smoke-filled studio with the sounds of air supply.
Oh God.
Or not air supply, but
cut off my air supply.
Right, exactly. But yeah, it's funny. My first full-time job in radio was also as the news director of a small country. Well, there are actually 3 radio stations under one roof, but I was the news director, quote unquote, for all 3, and that mostly meant going through headlines and press releases and stuff. There was nothing extravagant. I wasn't going out and interviewing people. But yeah, that was my first full-time job in radio. Yeah, also as a news director.
We had to make beat calls first thing in the morning, which meant calling all the area sheriff's departments and police stations.
You did?
And the state police. Yeah, I would come in my first job, and we'd have to make sure there were no fatal accidents or whatever.
Right.
And, there were a couple of sheriff's departments in southern Minnesota that had a recorded message that they put together for the various radio stations.
Oh, right, because other stations were calling in to get the same thing.
They didn't have to keep answering.
That's smart.
And the thing that I remember, you would call I think it was the Fillmore, Minnesota, or maybe it was the Houston County, Minnesota Sheriff's Department, and the recording would go something like this. This is the Fillmore County Sheriff's Department. There is no new news to report today.
And that was good for the citizens of that area because there had been no crimes. But bad for you.
What the heck are we going to talk about?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I often found myself in that position where I was just there's no news at all. And it was grueling. It was not the job for me, although I did it for quite a number of years. But, it was in Ogdensburg. It was a 45-minute drive from my house, and I had to be there at 5 in the morning. And I'm still not a morning person at all. I'm certainly better suited for the late-night smoky room call-in show. But that turned into hosting the midday show on one of the country stations, and then that turned into hosting the morning drive show on that same radio station. And I had a lot of fun. Looking back, I think that I overstayed my welcome personally because I was looking for other things in my career at the time.
You wanted to take this job and shove it,
as Johnny Paycheck would say, a song I got a lot of requests for at that radio station. But no, I did have a lot of fun, and it spawned it turned into this career here at North Country Public Radio. And I had a bit with my dad where he would call in every day and I would edit them down, and it turned into this segment that ran for years on this station, and something that, even though I haven't been on that station for 7.5 years now, people still bring it up to me when they see me in public, which is, very flattering and cool.
Well, and the interesting thing, at least for me, is that here we are, and for folks who don't know, when I'm not hosting Northwards, I'm also the station manager here at NCPR. And when you're not sitting in a studio and yammering with me, you are the multi-platform content specialist. Which makes for a very wide business card, I think. But I still have romantic thoughts about small town radio.
Yeah.
And maybe it was from watching too many episodes of Northern Exposure when I was younger.
I heard you talking about that. I don't know that show.
So it was a show that took place in a small town in Alaska, which felt a lot like any number of small towns in the North Country. And one of the things that the show included was this little town radio station, KBHR in Sicily, Alaska. And a couple of the characters, one was Chris of Chris in the Morning, and Maurice, who was this former astronaut who somehow had ended up in this town full of quirky people, of course, and was the owner of the radio station. And the station had its studios sitting there on Main Street with a window looking in, and some of Chris in the Morning provided the backdrop for things that were going on.
Okay, I gotcha.
But it was just this kind of sweet and quirky impression of small town radio, which in a lot of ways is really accurate.
Yeah.
I think you and I both have talked about like hosting things like the Swap Shop and the Agriculture Report and all of these kind of quirky small town, like, oh, I'm going to interview the head of the local extension office for the 34th time in a row.
And in a weird way, you become this critical part of people's days, even though they've never met you before. In some ways, you're playing entertainer, but also like sometimes if you're taking requests from people, you're kind of playing therapist as well. And which I always enjoyed. I was always really flattered by. But it imbues you with this tremendous sense of responsibility that you don't really realize is going to be thrust upon you when you open the mic for the first time. It's just like, oh, this is fun, I'll play requests. But then you realize, like, no, people rely on you, and when you let them down, they'll let you know it too. They're not shy about it. But yeah, getting back to that idea of like romantic notions, like, I think my worst fear of being in radio was that someday I'd be like a morning drive shock jock. And I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad to have the career I have. But, there is this idea that, you want to be the not only the personality, but the person also like calling the shots and playing the music. And, I think it's my fantasy to bring back my college radio show, which was the Vinyl Show, where me and some friends would talk about a record, and we played the first half of it, all of side A, and then we talk about it, then play all of side B, and then talk through the end of the hour. And I loved it so much. That's my romantic radio fantasy. What's
and that
yours?
Is what today's show is. Oh, no, it's not, actually. The reason we're having this conversation is that I had a chance to meet someone who I guess is a kindred spirit, and who is actually in the process of essentially starting up her own radio station.
She's like living out that fantasy.
Right. Yeah. Hers and other people in the community, but really right now, it's a very small group of people that's trying to launch this station. It's a low power FM station in Keeseville that they have permission to build. It's called Wheat Paste Radio. And the person that I talked to is a woman named Nico Brossar, who is new to the region, and she shared the story of this radio station to be.
Yep, Wheat Paste Radio. That was the first name that I came up with for this radio station, and I kind of was really stubborn about it, saying that. there was some talk like, oh, it should be Keeseville Radio or it should be this. I'm like, well, I just, and maybe that was me being a bit of a dictator, but I just think it's a fun name. But yeah, WAVG is our call sign, and it was really just because we first applied through Ausable Valley Grange, and so it's AVG. And then also I like that it's also playful, and it's like, oh, we're better than average.
So, okay, so dumb question. What does wheat paste radio mean?
Okay, so wheat paste is the sticky stuff that you would use to put posters up on a wall. You could do paper mache with wheat paste. I just like it because it's like a DIY thing. All it takes is water and flour to make wheat paste. And then it becomes like a pretty solid glue. So I just like the metaphor of that, of being like a DIY, this like message can be transmitted to people, and it's very simple. It just takes 2 ingredients.
And so it's not a stretch to imagine that as a radio station, the 2 ingredients are the people that make the radio and the people that listen to the radio.
Exactly.
Well, so, okay, what was missing from the world that you hope that Wheat Paste Radio will bring it?
I think what really bothered me is that there's this idea of Keeseville as like being not cultured or something. And I mean, it just being a small town and a little more blue collar, a little more, working class. And I think that is awesome. But I think also it has its culture. And I just figured it would be cool to showcase that in some way. And I think especially in Keeseville, like the radio is an important medium for news and for music. I think a lot of people still use it here. So I think it would just be cool to have a community radio station that could be more interactive and that people could congeal more. I mean, not to say they don't. I recognize I'm a transplant here, and I can't speak for the community. And in some ways that means that this is like a selfish project for me. I just think it would be cool and fun, but I'm part of like the farming community in Keeseville. And sometimes like there's not really overlap with the rest of the community. And that's kind of been talked about a bit. Like there's not like tension, but it's just like there's not really a crossover, and there's few ways to really bridge that gap. And I just think that like it's not just for one group of people, and it's not just for one type of person. And I think it would be really interesting to see what can come of it.
How did you end up in Keeseville?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I do know. I mean, I'm from New York City, which feels like a big cliche every time I say it, but I can't help where I'm from, I guess. And I grew up in Queens, and I lived there, up until 4.5 years ago when I moved up here. And that was during the pandemic. And basically I had no job down there. I lost it because of the pandemic. And I was also rent striking just because I'm maybe a little radical sometimes. My point is that I wasn't going to have my lease renewed, basically. I didn't have a job. I didn't really have anything going on at that point. And it was also very depressing to be down there and feel really alone and isolated. And then I met someone that was already living up here, and I basically just followed him up and started farming. And I was just living on this farm, and I was really reveling in that like hippie lifestyle, I suppose. But it gave me this sense of community that I don't think I've ever felt in my life. Even being around like a ton of people in New York City felt so lonely, but then being up here, and I had like 10 friends maximum, but they were the best friends, and they were so close, and that was really special. And so I just kind of kept finding my little like area in this place, and I just stayed, and I love it, and I can't really imagine going anywhere else. It feels really special.
It is amazing, the idea that you can be in a place with 8 million other people and feel alone, and then go to a place with 800 people and feel like you're part of something.
Yeah. And I feel like my life has meaning here. Like it has meaning and it's also a struggle. And I think that's really important for life. I think it needs to feel a little challenging. Can't be comfortable all the time.
Well, and you've certainly given yourself a challenge, right? Can you take us to the spark that became WAVG?
It was really just an idea. I think you know John Sokol. He retired out of radio. He worked in radio for 41 years, and him and I were just part of this group of people that were trying to revitalize the Grange in Keeseville, and we were just chatting. I think him and I we're different people, of course, but like in some ways we're very much dreamers, and so we were both just like chatting about what the Grange could be, but also like just our moonshot dreams. And one of them was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have a radio station here? And lo and behold, like, I don't know, within a month or two, he was getting the FCC emails anyways. And he got an email from the FCC saying, we're opening up the low power FM station application. And it's in a couple of months from now, it'll be open for a week. And that hasn't happened in 10 years. They haven't accepted new applications for low power stations in 10 years. So it just felt like we had to do it. Like there wasn't really an option. It's like we've said it enough that we wanted a radio station. We might as well try it now that it's potentially possible. So yeah, we just went for it. And he had a connection to an engineer back in Wisconsin, and he helped us. And then we got Prometheus to check our application, and we just did it, and it got approved somehow.
Was that a little surprise when you heard from the FCC that they said sure?
It was super surprising because we submitted that application in December. I think then they pushed the window to back a little bit to January, but anyway, our application was in by December, and then we didn't hear from them for 6 months. So we just thought like, okay, well, clearly they don't think it's a good idea, or for whatever reasons. Like there was potentially an issue with the Grange being the proper nonprofit type. There's so many different kinds of nonprofits, and it wasn't the right type. And then we had to give them more information. And then in June, like I said, 6 months later, we got an approval for a construction permit to start this radio station. And it was really surprising. I had already accepted that it wasn't going to happen, but yeah. And then I was like, oh no. At first I was really excited, and then I was like, oh no, this means I have to do a lot of work now. Yeah.
Well, and knowing a little something about FCC construction permits, then you're given a window that you have to do it within a certain amount of time, right?
Yes. And luckily this time around they have given us 3 years. Whereas I think in the past it's been 18 months with the possibility to extend it. But this time we get a set 3 years. But yeah, if we don't do it in 3 years, actually what happens is that Keeseville loses that frequency forever. Like that is no longer available for Keeseville if we don't get this started. And this was the only frequency available in our area. So it's kind of our one shot.
So you get the approval in June, and where has it gone from there? What have you been doing to try to get to the point where the station will literally sign on the air?
Yeah, it's been a lot of my own personal mental work of like just thinking about it, rereading our application documents basically and being like, okay, what did we say we were going to do? What is this supposed to be? And then also, of course, getting the community informed and involved. I think in some ways we did do this a little backwards, where we kind of just went for it without talking to anyone else about it. But I think also it's helpful to like have, the permit in hand and say, listen, this is what we can do, because we need to raise, this kind of keeps changing, like the amount of money that we need. Naturally, I've been going for $15,000 is what we need. I think it might be more than that based on like equipment costs and certain things. But so what the work has entailed now is just trying to get that money and raise it, and doing that by getting people to believe in this idea, which is a huge feat, to say, hey, there's an idea. There's actually nothing right now, but it's possible. Do you believe in that? Will you contribute to that idea and that dream.
Do you think you've started to build those bridges? I mean, you were talking about how, one of the issues was that the different sub communities within what a dumb word that was, but the different peer groups within Keeseville weren't always seeing themselves as part of the same community or interacting, or do you feel like you've started to make headway in getting people from different walks of life to believe in this project?
I mean, I'd like to think so, but I think it's hard to know, and especially because my approach so far has been like mostly online, and there's definitely people there, on Instagram, let's say, who are really interested. And it's hard to know like the demographics of those people too. It's like I don't really know who these people are, but they're excited about it and they have ideas for it and they are putting money into it. And so I try not to think too hard about like, am I doing enough for people I don't know yet? And this is my selfish thing again. It's like as long as I keep true to what I envision, hopefully other people will get on board with that. But I'm trying to how to get my tentacles out into the greater Keeseville or, deeper into the Keeseville community because like I said, I'm not from here and I'm not sure how I fit into the community and I don't want to force my own opinion on people or my own beliefs. And yeah, but I did do a mock radio station at the Keeseville Holiday Festival this year. And I think practically everyone there didn't know that this was happening, that the radio station could be a thing. They just thought I was just having fun and having a mock radio station. So I think there's definitely room for getting that awareness out. And I'm not totally sure how to do it all the time. And there's only so much that I can do, I think.
You also have this job, right? You're also a cheesemaker.
Yeah, I have a job. I have a job and I try to maintain a social life and read books and stuff like that and, do outdoor stuff. So yeah, it's like this radio station obviously is not paying me and also I just have to fit it into my life somehow. And luckily I want to and I like to do it, but sometimes I don't always get it right. And so I do need people to like get on board and be part of it. But I think that's the challenge that I have too, is trying to figure out how to delegate that stuff. And I think that if I could get more people involved who even like spreading awareness about this that would be amazing.
Well, I mean, if it's any consolation, NCPR has 34 transmitters around the region. And one of the things that we talk about almost nonstop is how do we reach the people that don't know about us? And it's hard because they don't know about us.
Yeah, and it's like, going down the same channels as like, okay, Instagram and Facebook. Like, I think actually Facebook has been really helpful because it does get a wider breadth of people. But even on Facebook, it's hard for people to like read my stuff or like read the posts I make. They don't know what it is. They're like, what is wheat paste radio?
Well, and I'm sure like the question has come up that, hey, it's 2025 and there are a million ways for people to listen to things. What is it about like real life, like, I say this delicately because I run a radio station, but like radio feels like in some ways a throwback. Why is it important to do this in the way that you're doing it as opposed to, hey, let's start an internet radio station?
Yeah, I mean, I think it being an internet radio station would, again, just like have one type of person. And maybe that's also me coming from New York City where there's like plenty of internet radio streams and they all like just a bunch of like really cool DJs. I think all DJs are cool, but they're like really hip and it's not really what I'm going for. I think it's like, I want this to encapsulate real life. And I think a broadcasting on-air radio station could do that. Plenty of people listen to the radio across demographics and I think it would be a great way to do it. And I think radio is underutilized as a medium for community and for media in general. I mean, I can go on and on. I also think this is more of my, like, I don't know, opinion. This is my opinion. But, I think what happened when we started going on our phone computers for media and entertainment, we actually become more disconnected from other generations and other kinds of people. And I think if we could, sitting next to a radio with your family, I mean, that's like very idealistic. But I think if it was just like, okay, this is your source of entertainment, it's a unifying thing, or it could be. And I think that's kind of my idealistic goal.
Did you grow up listening to the radio?
I did, but it was like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Z100, and it's like, top 100 hits. But my family is actually Russian, and so there was like a Russian radio station, and I thought that was really cool that they could have their own station, and it's in their own language, and the songs that they know and grew up with and stuff that they care about. Yeah, so I think there's a real importance and a use for radio.
It's funny as you're talking about this. The two of us, before we started recording, were kind of reflecting on like the romantic nature of the fictional radio station in the TV show Northern Exposure, which I remember from watching it when it was first on as I was getting into radio, and I gather you have just recently been exposed to as you're just getting into radio.
Yeah, I've been northernly exposed. Sorry, that was corny. Maybe that's another idealistic thing. I mean, it's a fictional world, but it also is very relevant to our community. It's like a small rural town with its own radio station that people in the community go to express their opinions and, share their thoughts and play some music, and they just all listen to it. I think that's amazing. Like, whether or not they enjoy it or like agree with it, it's just like, this is what we do. And I think it's beautiful. I would love to create something like that.
It sounds like, and not to put words in your mouth here, but maybe that's what I'm doing. It's like the anti-Spotify.
Yeah. It is the anti-Spotify. Yeah. Imagine a real person giving you music suggestions and sharing their music thoughts and whatever with you instead of like an AI thing. I mean, that would be unheard. That'd be amazing. You would actually hear things that you might not even expect to enjoy instead of it being the same 10 songs on repeat, whether or not you did that to yourself, but it's really the playlists that they keep giving you. It's the same music over and over again. And it's tiring for me, at least. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about radio without an algorithm behind it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's radio without an algorithm. It's not going to be perfect, right? You can't expect, and I don't think algorithms are perfect either, but it's going to be a unique thing. As soon as you dial in to the frequency, it might be something you don't really like, and it's going to be a surprise. I think that's exciting. I think the variety is important, and I think actually people might find that they really enjoy that.
So for people who are listening to our interview who have never thought about starting a radio station, what's the kind of equipment that you're talking about that you need to be able to get up and running?
Yeah, I mean, an antenna for starters, right? We need to transmit that stuff. Oh, and a transmitter to transmit to the antenna. Transmitters, and I've mentioned this to you already, they're very specific. So you need an LPFM certified transmitter for a low power station. Those are really expensive. And then you need an emergency alert system, which is a requirement for all radio stations. Also really expensive. But that is a requirement, which I think is kind of funny. You would think that they would subsidize that or something, or, help out with that.
Yes, you would think.
You would think. And then, the old audio stuff, mixer, microphones, speakers, other stuff that I can't even imagine at this point, racks, things to put CDs into. Can you believe that? Record players. Yeah, there's lots of stuff, and there's stuff that we hope to get, and then there's the bare minimum, which is okay, we will be happy with this if this happens. But yeah, the transmitter, EAS, the emergency alert system, and the antenna are absolutely essential. And that's really what we're fundraising for, because that would help us start broadcasting and then we could apply for a broadcasting license through the FCC.
Do you have like a I don't know, a dream or a whatever an audio image is, like a sound in your head for, say, if we were having this conversation 18 months from now, what Wheat Paste Radio might sound like? Is it the guy down the street hauling in his collection of polka records that he listens to and playing them for an hour on Sunday mornings or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. That, and then this is also a Northern Exposure thing, commenting on the traffic out the window. That person's going a little too fast. I love that. And, that kind of looks like snippets from life mixed with these like obscure sounds of like polka music or whatever other music people are into. That's so sweet to me. I love that.
It has me thinking back. I went to college in a little town in Iowa, and when I did the morning show, we would talk about we would do the traffic report between Mount Vernon, Iowa and Lisbon, Iowa, and how long the delay was at the one traffic light.
Yeah. I mean, people do that on Facebook already. They love to know how the roads are.
There's a train going through. Leave an extra 5 minutes if you have to.
Yeah, exactly. There's snow on the road. It's about half an inch, and no one salted this little corner here. I mean, that I love real life. I love that kind of stuff.
Well, and in like a semi-serious way, people aren't getting that information on the radio anyplace else. As local as NCPR tries to be, we're not telling people whether there's still snow on the road going through downtown Keeseville.
Yeah, it's true. And also, it's kind of interesting because as soon as we got this construction permit, there was a boil water order in Keeseville, but the only way that they shared that information was, again, through Facebook. And sure, that gets some people, but I mean, a radio, it'd be amazing to utilize the radio to give that kind of information out, boil water order today for a week maybe, and all this information that you don't have in one spot.
Well, lost dogs and, school delays, whatever.
Yeah. And also, I mean, people sharing their art and their creativity, their music, their actual, if they're musicians, there's plenty of people around here that do that and have something to share and don't really have a place to share it. You could do live events and you can stream on whatever, YouTube or on Facebook again. But to have a platform for that, for all of that, that's a dream to me, for sure.
And to have the ability to reach people who didn't know they were going to hear it.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, to just have people drive, down the highway and just accidentally tune into this and see what a colorful and interesting place this is. I mean, it doesn't really matter what they think, but I want to share that. I think I want to share how interesting and unique we all are in this area. So, yeah, that's kind of a fantasy. Or maybe it could be reality.
Well, I can think of no better way to wrap up the interview than that. Nico Brossar, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.
It was fun. That was Nico Brossar, who is heading an effort to launch Wheat Paste Radio WAVG-LP, the low-power FM station, which has permission to build out in Keeseville. You can learn more about WAVG Wheat Paste Radio at ncpr.org/northwards. That's all for this episode, and Ethan Shanty joins us back in the studio with a list of all the people who make this show possible.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, produced, and edited by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. You can support this program and find more conversations by visiting ncpr.org/northwards. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.